Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends. Welcome back to our ProRevenge channel, where you'll hear stories about people getting what they deserve. In this episode, we have 6 lovely revenge stories for you. The first is about a staff sergeant who messes with the original poster and lands in big trouble. The second story features the original poster sharing an ongoing battle with a demolition man. The third one is a tale where the original poster gets revenge and a car gets repossessed. I hope you enjoy the stories today. Please hit that subscribe button for more revenge stories in the future. If you like this kind of content, let's dive in. Back when I was in my first unit, we had to ship all of our 7-ton trucks to get armored. Over the course of a year or so, we sent them from South Carolina to Wisconsin. I was in charge of logistics at the time and handled loading the trucks, which was overall a pretty easy task. The only challenge was the documentation. Everything was going well until a new staff sergeant showed up in the motor pool. He made my life miserable when I tried to ship these trucks. I didn't particularly enjoy the task. It wasn't overly fun and sometimes required me to work on weekends. I would have been happy to skip it, but headquarters ordered it, so I had no choice. There was no reason for him to be so grumpy with me. Once he took over, shipping these trucks became a real pain in the neck because he wanted to micromanage everything, likely because I was a lower rank. I let him take charge, and he insisted on signing off on everything. Finally, I'd had enough of him, so I decided to create extra lines for him to sign. One day I figured since he loved signing things and acting important, I'd mess with him. When my next big shipment came along, instead of sending the trucks to Wisconsin as they were supposed to go, I decided 29 Palms, California would be a great alternative location. I changed some codes on the sheets, handed them to the staff sergeant, who made more snarky comments, and he signed them without even looking. Off the trucks went. A couple of weeks later, a call came in that our trucks never arrived. The command started getting worried that a few trucks had gone missing. They came to our shop and we informed them that the staff sergeant had taken charge of all the shipments lately. When they confronted him, he proudly admitted he'd taken over but crumbled when asked where the trucks were. It took a couple of weeks, but a call finally came from 29 Palms, reporting that the trucks had shown up but nobody had claimed them. The command was furious. As far as they were concerned, this foolish staff sergeant got involved when he didn't need to and sent 4 massive trucks across the country instead of where they were supposed to go. He was told to leave the logistics department, and I had the whole thing sorted out in an hour. I always love hearing Army stories. I wonder how much it cost to have all those trucks sent to the wrong location. It couldn't have been cheap to ship 4 7-ton trucks across the country and then have them reshipped to the correct location. Next story. This next tale of revenge happened a while back and is still a work in progress. It's too good not to share, and I'll try to keep you updated as things develop. The characters in this story are my friend, whom I'll call Brian, the demolition man, whom we'll call Keith, a greedy developer, whom we'll call Karen, and an insurance assessor. Brian's neighbor, Karen, is a typical greedy landlord who left her rental house in disrepair. The poor tenant was living in a cold house with raw sewage leaking onto the lawn and holes in the walls so big you could see light coming through. Despite multiple requests from Brian, Karen refused to make any repairs. When the state government introduced new laws requiring landlords to insulate rental properties, instead of fixing the house, Karen kicked out her tenant and left the house vacant for 5 years. During that time, the house deteriorated even further, with rats infesting it and invading nearby homes. Brian and his wife, with their limited funds, secured enough lending from the bank to offer to buy the house. They wanted to fix it up to improve the neighborhood or rent it out, as there's a massive shortage of rental properties in our county. Greedy Karen refused to sell or spend a single cent on the house to address the rodent problem. She also didn't care about how the house was ruining the street's appearance. It's worth noting that Karen and her wealthy family own over 100 rental properties. Due to regional tax laws, they pay nothing in taxes and even get tax write-offs when their properties deteriorate. In short, some of them seem to be leeches in our society, contributing to skyrocketing property and rent prices. Karen's husband is also the chairman of the state's Landlord Association, often fronting the media to defend landlords and spin positive PR amidst negative press. Fast forward 5 years, and Brian learned that the house next door was set to be demolished to make way for new houses on that small lot. This was good news, but Brian and his wife were anxious about how smoothly the demolition would go, as their houses are quite close to each other. This detail becomes important later. Before the demolition, the company was required to take samples from all sides of the house to check for asbestos. Either Karen made it difficult for the company to access the property, or they were just lazy, but samples were taken from only 3 sides, not 4. On demolition day, Brian was concerned that no safety barriers had been put up to protect his house, nor was there anything to stop dust and debris from covering his new deck and porch area. Later that day, Brian met Keith, the demolition company manager, who is well known in the district for caring only about money and having little regard for people or property. Keith was operating the digger himself that day. Brian returned home during his work break to check on the demolition's progress and found that it was already complete after just an hour or so. The house was reduced to a pile of rubble. He climbed onto his roof and, to his disbelief, found hundreds of bricks scattered across it, causing damage. Luckily, none had fallen through into the house. Brian called Keith to ask what went wrong. Keith initially downplayed the damage, despite there being about 200 bricks on Brian's roof. Even with the obvious damage, Keith offered no apology. Brian, keeping his cool, said, "Since I did a bit of roofing when I was younger, I can fix the roof if you just get me 4 new sheets of roofing iron, and we'll call it even. Don't worry about paying for paint. I can sort that out when I repaint the whole roof later." Brian's roof wasn't in great shape to begin with, but it was in much worse condition after the bricks left massive dents and chipped the paint. This was the moment Keith's simple decision would cause major trouble for both him and the landlord. Keith replied, "Not happening, pal. I'll get you a sheet of second-hand roofing iron from my yard to repair the damage, and I can come hose the dust off your deck and dog kennel." The revenge wasn't intentionally catastrophic, but Brian faced a dilemma. His roof was damaged and needed repairs. Normally a calm and relaxed person, Brian was furious about how he and his property were treated, sparking an anger I've never seen in him before. Brian contacted his insurance company, and because the claim involved a roof, a building assessor arrived that day to evaluate the damage. The assessor would determine if damages could be sought from the landlord or the demolition company if they were found at fault. Brian also reported the demolition company to local health and safety authorities for their lack of safety precautions during the demolition. The assessor joined Brian on the roof and was mortified to hear how Keith had disregarded the damage. Then, looking more concerned, the assessor picked up some gray, fibrous material and said, "Luckily, thanks to COVID, we're already wearing masks, Brian, but this looks like asbestos. I don't know how they got the sign-off to demolish this house in this manner. If you breathe in these fibers, it can cause serious diseases later in life, including lung cancer. I'll send this to a lab for testing, and we'll be in touch." The next day, Brian's insurance company called with an update. It turned out the side of the house that wasn't tested was clad in asbestos. The insurance company would seek damages to replace Brian's entire roof, not just the damaged part, at an estimated cost of around $20,000. That's the cheap part. The demolition site was shut down by local authorities, and a massive decontamination of the area is required. This involves removing at least half a meter of topsoil from surrounding properties, testing the soil, and removing more if asbestos is still found. Areas with decks may need to have the decks removed to excavate the soil underneath. The cleanup cost is likely to be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, but it's unclear at this stage whether Keith, Karen's insurance, or Karen herself will foot the bill. Time will tell. As for Brian, his family, and their dog, they were potentially exposed to asbestos, which is another battle they'll have to fight. I'll keep you updated. I feel this will end badly for Karen and Keith. I did some digging and couldn't find any news articles about this, which is surprising because an entire area contaminated with asbestos seems like something the news would cover. I'm actually glad it played out this way. If they had just fixed Brian's roof when he asked, many people's health might have been at risk in the long run. So, it's probably for the best that it happened this way. I'm looking forward to future updates on this story. Next story. Now for some backstory, Jack and Jill had been dating for nearly 5 years by the time of this story. A year earlier, Jill lost her job when the company she worked for was liquidated. Money got tight for Jill, so Jack offered to cover her car payments so she could use her money for rent and utilities until she found a new job and became financially stable. Jack had a decent job, so it wasn't a strain on his income. A year passed, and Jill was still unemployed, not because of rejections, but because she got lazy and spent her days doing nothing at home while Jack was at work. One day, Jack got off work early and decided to surprise Jill. On his way home, he saw another car in her driveway. He parked on the street, sneaked up to the house, and looked through the window to see Jill with another man. Jack was furious but didn't burst in. He walked away, got into his car, and drove off. When he got home, he did some digging and found out through Facebook that Jill had been having an affair with this guy for 6 months. Now, really angry, Jack wanted revenge and knew just how to get it. Here's where the revenge comes in. Jill loved her car, even though she barely used it. Jack stopped all the car payments coming out of his bank account and transferred them to Jill's account. Since the payments had just gone out, he had to wait until the end of the month for his revenge to unfold. When the end of the month arrived, Jill's bank card was declined at the shops. She called the bank and learned she'd gone overdrawn because the car payments were now coming out of her account. Jill called Jack and asked why the payments were coming from her account instead of his. Jack replied, "Because I know you cheated on me, and I'm not going to pay for my ex-girlfriend's car." Then he hung up. The fallout of the revenge was significant. Jill tried to get Jack to pay for the car and even involved lawyers, but since she was the sole owner of the car, it was ruled that Jack had no legal responsibility to cover the payments. Unable to afford the car, road tax, or insurance, Jill could no longer drive it. Eventually, she fell far behind on payments, and the car was repossessed to cover her debt. She had to take a minimum wage job, and now takes the bus to and from work. This is one of the lighter stories I've read on the sub about cheaters. At least her whole life didn't crumble around her, so I consider that pretty lucky. Next story. I was getting out of the military, and service members have 2 options for their move when they leave. You can either rent a U-Haul, pack up, drive home and get reimbursed, or you can hire a moving company contracted through the military to move your stuff for you. I was moving from a small duplex in California to Colorado, so I opted to have the company move me. I had recently undergone major spine surgery and was in no shape to move anything myself. While I was still recovering, all of our things were loaded up and I received my delivery date. The delivery date came and no one showed up. I had taken the day off from my new civilian job and was upset that I was missing work for them not to even contact me about missing the delivery. This was just the beginning of the downward spiral that was about to occur. I called the company and they assured me they would deliver a week later, giving some flimsy excuse for not making it. I took off work again, and yet again, they didn't show up. I called once more and learned they weren't delivering my stuff because they had lost my paperwork and couldn't locate my shipment. They literally lost my stuff. Great. I spent the next 3 weeks trying to get to the bottom of where my things were. I had spent almost 2 months with an empty condo, and I was getting impatient. But I also understood that if I lost my cool, it would just make them less willing to work with me. So, I kept my composure. After 3 weeks of feeding me nonsense, they finally found my shipment. Finally all the hassle was over and I could get my things, or so I thought. They told me that the following week they'd make the delivery. I explained the situation to my job and thankfully they were extremely understanding and let me take off a 3rd time to be there when my things arrived. The day before the delivery it rained all morning long. This will be relevant later. The following day I sat around all day waiting for the shipment, which was supposed to come midday. They didn't arrive until 9 o'clock at night. I could have worked a full day and been home, which annoyed me, but at least I was finally getting my stuff. They started opening the 2 wooden crates with my belongings when they found that one of the crates had severe water damage. Severe, remember that rain from the day before? Well, in this company's infinite wisdom, they were loading my things up the day before when it was raining. Supposedly, they ran out of room on the truck just as they got to my stuff, and their solution was to leave the crate out in the rain all morning long instead of bringing it back into the dry warehouse. Thankfully, most of our clothes and really important items were in the dry crate that had been left in the warehouse and weren't destroyed. However, our couch was completely ruined by the water damage. We ended up having them take it back because I didn't want a nasty-smelling, wet couch in our condo. We made a list of the damaged items with the movers, and they gave us instructions to submit a claim. Now, little backstory on the couch. We bought it used off Craigslist for $150, and originally, we were trying to sell it before the move. We couldn't, so we kept it. We did take pictures of the couch with the fold-out bed option shown. They had to pay for the full value of the couch, and we eventually found out that, brand new, this couch was $2,300 from Crate & Barrel. We were ecstatic because it felt like karma for the moving company messing us over all this time. But it gets even better. The moving company reviewed our claim and insisted we picked the wrong model because our couch didn't have a pull-out bed. At this point, they were just trying to avoid paying full price and were attempting to get us to take less money. Thankfully, I still had pictures with the bed pulled out to prove it was indeed a pull-out version. Finally, they accepted I was right and agreed on the settlement. A month later, the check came in, and wouldn't you know it, the check bounced. Not only was it frustrating, but sending a bounced check of over $2,000 was technically a crime. I could have pressed charges for it. At this point, all I cared about was getting my money and never having to deal with this company again. I called to inform them that the check bounced, and they assured me it would be taken care of soon. A week went by, and I heard nothing, so I called again. As soon as they found out it was me, they said they'd transfer me, and then hung up. They did this every time I called for the next 2 weeks. I sent them a written notice requesting payment within 10 days of receiving the notice, and still nothing. I was several months into all the nonsense this company put me through, and I was fed up. So, I tried an idea my dad gave me. I contacted my local CBS news station, which had a segment dedicated to helping people in the community. They were thrilled to help out a disabled veteran, especially after hearing about the nonsense I'd gone through. The reporter came to my house and did a 5-minute interview that aired Monday night. I cited the fact that these companies are paid by the government using taxpayers' money and are mistreating our service members. That was about it, nothing too exciting, but it worked wonders. The next morning, the vice president of the company called me and made sure I got my money wired to my account before the end of the day. Finally, I was done with these guys. But it gets even better. The military was notified of the story, and a colonel from the Marine Corps headquarters at the Pentagon called me. I explained everything that happened, and he thanked me for the information, saying he'd follow up later. A week later, he called back and informed me that the company had lost its contract with the military and was undergoing further investigation. So, not only did they get terrible publicity from my story being run on CBS, but they also lost what I assume was a very lucrative contract with the military. All in all, it took months of patience, keeping my cool and maintaining a solid paper trail of evidence that showed I had given them every opportunity to do things right, and they had messed me over every time. What a brilliant revenge! Who would have thought that going on the news to expose a shady moving company would get you what you wanted? I did some quick Googling to try to find the news article Op was talking about, but I didn't have any luck. However, I did find that there are so many horror stories that made it on the news about shady companies mistreating military families. I've never dealt with moving companies myself, so I'm not sure if it's moving companies in general that are shady or just the ones contracted by the military. Let me know in the comments if you've ever dealt with a lousy moving company. Next story. Back in the day, I worked as an independent IT consultant and was hired along with another independent subcontractor on a team from a major consulting house. We'll call it CH. Everyone else on the team was a CH employee. The two of us were not supposed to tell the client we weren't part of CH, but the client figured it out pretty quickly because we independents were doing most of the work, while CH's staff were busy filling out spreadsheets all day and going on team-building exercises. But I digress. The project ran past its initial deadline, and my contract expired. I stayed on a week-to-week basis as a professional courtesy to get the project finished. Unfortunately, the CH project manager was booked somewhere else for his next gig, and they brought in a new guy to replace him. Let's call him David Stress. David flew in on a Monday morning to get the project handed off to him, and immediately started acting territorial. He was derogatory and belittling to the team and liked to raise his voice. I was working in my office and didn't hear what he was saying in the main room, but I could sure hear his tone. He then burst into the office and demanded, "How are we doing? I said we were using Program X." He waved his hand dismissively, scoffed, and said, "That's stupid. Program X won't work for this. You need something else." The other independent contractor was in the room at the time, and she later told me she thought I was going to deck him. I knew he was full of it because I wrote Program X. It was custom code for this project, and he had no way of knowing what it would or wouldn't do. He was just trying to bully me and act like the alpha. I didn't deck him. Instead, I went to the client's payroll manager, with whom I'd been working closely for months and who was driving the client side of the project. I laid it on the line. I said, "Look, I know I don't work for I'm here on an independent contract. That contract's up, and I've been working here on a week-to-week basis just to get you guys through. This new guy, David Stress, is a bully and a blowhard. I won't work with him. I have no contract at this point, and with him running the project, I won't be back next week. I'm not asking you to do anything specific about it. I'm just letting you know as a courtesy so you can plan to transition my work to someone else." She sat back in her chair, thought for a moment, and said, "Okay, thanks for letting me know." 2 hours later, David Stress was removed from his new position. The payroll manager was faced with losing the one technical guy on the team who actually knew what was going on with a very complicated payroll system. They called CH and said, "We don't want this new guy. Take him away." The funniest part was that CH had scheduled a welcome dinner for David at a posh steakhouse that evening. Rather than create further embarrassment by canceling the dinner, they went ahead with it as a farewell dinner for David, who had been on the project for less than 1 day. It was fun to watch him try to put on a brave face for that. I bet David didn't expect that. Respect is earned, not freely given. My friends, that's why I preach so hard to be nice to one another, because you never know what a bad attitude toward people will lead to. That must have been a super awkward dinner for him. I can't believe he even showed up. Next story. A while ago, I worked at a big box store called Walmart, not long after the Great Recession of 2008. Management was trying to cut costs because of falling profits. One of the first things they did was fire 2 of the 3 full-time maintenance and cleaning guys. The one guy they kept, I'll call him MG for maintenance guy, was amazing at his job. Everything in the store ran well because of him and his willingness to go beyond what was required to help people. He was a genuinely nice guy. For 6 months, management tried to make having 1/3 of the maintenance staff work, and it failed miserably. MG couldn't do everything, and over time management increasingly asked him to coordinate some part-timers who were supposed to handle cleaning and carts. He spent so much time coordinating that he had no time for maintenance. The night crew was also cut so they couldn't pick up the slack. Then, 2 things happened within a week that showed management how important MG was to keeping the store running well. First, some cleaning machines broke down. It turns out they needed to be properly cleaned weekly. If left alone, they gummed up badly, and parts wore out quickly, leading to a several $1,000 repair bill because MG was told to prioritize coordinating part-timers over maintaining machines. A few days later, the deli lady nearly quit after the blade on her deli slicer went flying off and could have cut her face badly. It turns out the bolt that held it in place was loose, and MG had tightened it weekly for her. When he didn't have time to do that anymore, he told management it needed to be replaced for safety. Management didn't do that because it cost money, but they told people it was fixed. That could have been a lawsuit. They and the deli lady got lucky. Management sat down with MG and asked why things were going wrong. MG told them point blank that he needed enough time for maintenance, and someone else had to coordinate the part-time cleaners and check on them. Management called his explanation nonsense, saying maintenance should be easy and done quickly. MG got mad because that insulted his professionalism. He pulled out his notebook from his back pocket. Over his 15 years, he had filled it with charts, schedules, and diagrams of how to do his job and keep things running. There were over 100 things he checked weekly or monthly. Many machines were kept in running order, and some had quirks that required specific handling to keep them functional. What management didn't know was that he was basically keeping multi-$1,000 machines, which were on their way out, working. He spent about half an hour explaining to management what he did, and he suspected that until then, nobody had realized how much he did. At the end, he put his notebook back in his pocket and offered to take a week to write up everything he knew, so management would have written proof of why his job mattered, just in case a higher-up asked why they increased maintenance costs when corporate was demanding cuts. The multiple managers in the room looked at each other and then asked him to leave so they could talk in private. MG told me years later that he had a premonition as he walked out of the room. So, he went to the back room and tossed his notebook into the garbage compactor. For good measure, he went around the store, emptied all the garbage cans, and tossed those bags in, ensuring his notebook was buried. He was fine with it. All that information was in his head. A few minutes later, management called him back. They told him they couldn't allow him to keep working there because of the level of insubordination he had shown. They said as soon as he surrendered his badge, box cutter, and notebook, he would be escorted out of the building by security. He handed over his badge and box cutter, and they asked for the notebook. He said he threw it into the compactor. Their eyes went wide, and they asked why he threw it out. He said he thought he was going to write everything up nicely on the computer from memory, so he thought he was done with the notebook. Management started looking at each other, worried, because they had intended to take the book, fire him, and have another part-timer do his job. Now they couldn't. He was given the chance to be unfired just long enough to give them the information. How kind. He laughed, walked out with his head held high, and management followed him to his car to make sure he left. I don't have the exact numbers, but I estimate the store had to spend at least $20,000 or $30,000 to replace the equipment MG had kept working beyond its lifespan. The new guy they hired had a tough time figuring out how things worked. These stories are a masterclass in how entitlement and incompetence can backfire spectacularly, and I'm here for it. The Army truck story is pure genius. I've dealt with micromanaging bosses, and the staff sergeant's snarky oversight screams arrogance. OP's sly move to send trucks to California instead of Wisconsin is deliciously petty. I can't imagine the chaos when they realized the trucks were missing. The sergeant's fall from grace is a reminder to check details before signing off. I'd love to know the shipping costs. That mistake must have stung. The asbestos demolition story is infuriating yet satisfying. Karen's negligence as a landlord and Keith's careless demolition are a toxic combo. I've seen slumlords dodge responsibility, so Brian's roof damage sparking a massive cleanup feels like justice. The potential health risks from asbestos exposure are chilling, and I hope Brian's family stays safe. Keith's cheap offer of second-hand iron shows his greed, and I'm eager for updates on who pays the hefty bill. Jack and Jill's story is a classic cheater's downfall. I've seen friends blindsided by infidelity, and Jack's calm revenge, cutting off car payments, is perfect. Jill's entitlement, expecting Jack to fund her car while cheating, is galling. The repossession and her bus-riding reality check are poetic. I'm glad Jack moved on unscathed. The moving company fiasco hits close to home. I've had movers botch things, but losing a shipment and ruining a couch is next-level incompetence. OP's patience and the CBS News exposure are brilliant. That military contract loss must have crushed the company. It's a testament to persistence and leveraging media. The IT consultant story is gold. David Stress's bullying screams insecure leadership. I love how OP's quiet ultimatum to the client got him ousted in hours. That farewell steak dinner is the cherry on top, awkward and deserved. The Walmart maintenance story is heartbreaking but triumphant. MG's dedication kept the store running, yet management's cost-cutting arrogance ignored his expertise. Tossing his notebook was a power move. I'd have done the same. The $20,000 to $30,000 equipment replacement cost is sweet karma for their disrespect. These stories show that standing up to incompetence with clever compliance hits hard. And that, my friends, brings us to the end of another r/ProRevenge. If you enjoyed the stories, be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you missed the last episode of r/ProRevenge, check it out, and I'll see you in the next one. I love you.